My name is Patrick Sears, and I'd like to take a few minutes to talk to you about education, be it yours, that of a child who's currently enrolled in school, or one who hasn't yet. Specifically, home education, a topic of particular importance to me, being as I was home educated for a sizable portion of my formative years. It seems as though the entire field of alternative education is plagued by a thick miasma of general ignorance and misinformation. In the case of home education specifically, many who haven't researched it will reflexively assume that any parent who chooses to keep their child out of typical school is either stupendously rich and capable of employing professional tutors to educate their child in fine arts and entrepreneurship or similar topics, a lunatic who insists on living on the fringe of society, or a religious extremist who insists on controlling everything their child learns. It should go without saying, but were these stereotypes based in any meaningful reality, I wouldn't be advocating it. The fact of the matter is, an ever-growing number of parents are becoming aware that school isn't always a good learning environment for their children. Some of the most common reasons being, it often drains young children of their intrinsic curiosity, teaching them to view learning as a tedious chore that only happens when a teacher demands it of them, rather than an ongoing process of growth that happens throughout their lives. Or a child is simply miserable at school because the curriculum isn't equipped to properly service their needs and interests, or because they're bullied. I'll be exploring these in more detail later on. Before I continue, I should clarify. I'm attempting to explain the benefits of home education, but that doesn't mean I wholly condemn conventional schooling. Many people are well suited to it and will be very content. However, just as many would have their lives and education drastically improved by this approach if only they knew more about it. Another stipulation to make clear is, I, and home educators in general, have complaints regarding the syllabus in schools, but we don't necessarily have any issue with teachers. In my experience, they're dedicated people who work very hard to help their students in spite of such problems with the school as a whole. I have heard countless teachers and pupils alike bemoan the fact that they're often forced through dull or unhelpful lessons because it's for the test, rather than because it provides important, useful or relevant information and skills. I digress. Even among those that agree with home education on a conceptual level are often under the misguided belief that there is some legal or practical barrier that prevents them from pursuing it in their own lives. To be brief, there isn't. Home education is permitted by international law. The specifics may vary from place to place, but it's allowed in some capacity or other throughout the developed world. There's even a provision describing as such in our human rights, specifically Article 26, which states, "The parent of every child of compulsory education age shall cause them to receive efficient, full-time education either by regular attendance at school or otherwise." It's this exact use of the term otherwise from which Education Otherwise, a charity I'll be discussing further in just a little bit, derives its name. Furthermore, in most cases, a child will automatically be listed as home educated if they're delisted from a school. So if you want to home educate, and are able, you can start immediately. There's no need to consult any legal authorities for permission, and you don't have to be a qualified teacher, although it might help. If that sounds too intimidating, there are a number of organisations you might choose to consult for advice to help establish a status quo, build your confidence in teaching, or answer questions you might have about home education. One of the most prominent being the one I mentioned a few moments ago, Education Otherwise, a charitable organisation that endeavours to provide a network of support and advice for home educators throughout the UK. A likely first question is simply, what is it actually like? There's no single answer to this, because the schedule and curriculum are decided upon by the educator and the child. You might follow the national curriculum, or the child might select topics that are of particular interest to them. You might have a set timetable, or you might devote time to engaging with your community, going out to do activities and volunteer work whilst learning from situations as they arise. One of the many perks being that you can generally cover topics far faster than you would in a classroom, because the teacher doesn't have to accommodate a large group of pupils that work at very different speeds with very different skill levels. In my personal experience, I can understand complex scientific concepts after an hour or two of research, whereas the same topic might take a full day or even a whole week to teach in a classroom. To be clear, depending on the source cited, homeschooled children perform anywhere between 0.7 and 30% better in all major subject areas than children from public schools. A common argument against home education is that school helps to develop social skills, and that those outside of it will be socially stilted and lonely. My counterpoint is, typical schools condition children to blindly follow or even fear authority figures like teachers, having a negative impact on their confidence and willingness to share their thoughts and opinions. Plus, they'll only mingle with those that are similar to them in age, ability and interests. In contrast, home-educated children, like myself, are often observed to be more socially developed, because they learn from and socialise with people from very different walks of life, and are a variety of ages, with a more flexible power structure. In addition to this, reports of bullying from school children are, according to some sources, more than 2.5 times more common than those of their homeschool counterparts. This all suggests a demonstrable improvement in the social and practical skills taught at home, where the educator can cater to the specific needs and wants of their child, in comparison to at a school. Some might argue that parents should be responsible for teaching social skills, not the school. This sounds reasonable until you consider it in detail. Some parents might be caring and skillful enough to provide appropriate tutoring in these areas, but there are approximately 70.4 thousand children in public care in England alone as of 2016. And when you add the number of parents that are unable or unwilling to effectively teach social skills, that would leave many, many thousands of children without the means to develop those important skills. Of course, this is also one of the major issues with mass adoption of homeschooling. It's not scalable. I maintain it's effective for many individual families, but it's entirely dependent on circumstances. So it should be seen as a desirable alternative to public school for those that are fortunate or dedicated enough to do it, not a standard to replace school. In this segment, which was recorded separately from the rest of my piece, I'll be talking to someone with many years of practical and academic experience in alternative education, who also happens to be my mum. The first question is, how did you come to be involved in home education?
Well, it was when I was expecting my first child, and I borrowed a book from an antenatal class about an alternative method of parenting, really a more traditional one, attachment parenting, and this book also introduced the idea of home education. It resonated with me because it completely addressed the concerns that I'd had about the modern Western care and education of children. So I was conveniently also doing a degree in education, so from then on I was able to specialise. All my research and all my essays became about things relating to home education or other alternatives. I met a number of home educating families, and I was constantly impressed by the maturity of the children and their natural curiosity, and I decided that that would be not just the study of my degree, but the approach that I would take with the children that I was going to have.
Okay, so what happened after that?
Well, fortunately, my special interest in the alternative education scene was recognised by the university. So after my degree, I had the opportunity to lecture in various courses that I created myself, which explored all the various alternatives that were available in education at the time, the pros, the cons, and so on. I also joined a group of home educating friends, and together we formed a community where all the children, at least in the early years, would be home educated, so that we felt a togetherness in our parenting approach, and that overcame a lot of the potential isolation that could come from not sending your children to school.
When you were raising me and Kathy, were there any moments when there were doubts or regrets about home education that you had?
Well, I had come to believe that the most powerful form of learning, effectively, was a very autonomous style of mostly self-directed learning, and that learning was an inevitable consequence of living an active life. It would be fueled by natural curiosity, as long as that wasn't squashed through fear or external expectation, and that it would result in a very positive attitude to lifelong learning, that children would discover their real passions when they were ready, and not according to some external timetable. My beliefs were tested to their limit when, for example, my daughter showed no interest at all in reading a book until almost her mid-teens. Now she's a prolific writer and about to complete her first novel. So when I look back on it, I can see that although at times I thought, am I doing the right thing? Is this really going to work? The personal qualities I feel most strongly about encouraging or developing in my children are now abundantly clear in them, and I couldn't have been more satisfied with what we all achieved as a home educating family.
Okay. Thank you for helping me with this, Mum. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, and goodbye.
I love you, Mum. Thank you for home educating me. It was one of the best things you have ever done for me, and you have done a lot of things for me, so that's quite a significant achievement.
Oh.
Thank you for listening. If any of what I've said has piqued your interest, I encourage you to do your own research and decide on your own if homeschooling is right for you and your family. I've been Patrick Sears. I'll see you next time.